Good evening, everyone. My name is Bernie Ramos, and I'm going to report the application of our topic, which is person product moment correlation coefficient, the small r. Now, let's do an example of correlation coefficient. An agricultural research organization tested a particular chemical fertilizer to try to find out whether an increase in the amount of fertilizer used would lead to a corresponding increase in the food supply. Let's look at the example or the data. Fertilizer in pounds and bushels of beans. Bushels means this is a measure of capacity that is equal to 64 US pints. That is equivalent to 35.2 liters. And it is used for dry goods, and that's the data. Now, we need to think about who is going to be X and who is going to be Y. In this case, the fertilizer is going to be X because that's independent on how many beans will be produced, and Y is called the independent or the dependent rather dependent variable because it depends on fertilizer. Okay, now that we know which one's X and which one is Y, we're going to write the data vertically. Now for the correlation coefficient, we're going to need more variables. We're going to need X times Y, we're going to need X squared and also Y squared, and we're going to need those as well. Now, let's multiply x times y. So, 2 times 4 is 8, 1 times 3 is 3, 3 times 4 is 12, 2 times 3 is 6, 6 times 6 is 24, and 5 times 5 is 25, and 3 times 5 is 15. So, we fill that column up. And let's also now do x squared. Make sure we get the x variable. So, 2 squared is 4. Sorry for that. 1 squared is 1. 3 squared is 9, 2 squared is 4, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, and 3 squared is 9. Also, don't forget we need to utilize the y column. So 4 squared is 16, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 3 squared is 9, 6 squared is 36, and 5 squared is 25, and again 5 squared again is 25. We'll add up column xy, xy, x squared and y squared, so we can find the sum. So the sum of x, we add that column, gives you 20, and the sum of y, we add it all up, gives you 30, and the sum of xy, and we sum that, we get 93, and the sum of x squared, we sum that, we get 68, and the sum of y squared, we add that up, we get 136. And the formula for r, the correlation coefficient, r is n times the sum of x times y, and take away the sum of x times the sum of y. So all that we're going to divide that, and the denominator will be n times the sum of x squared. So take away the sum of x, and when you have the sum of x, then square it. All this is going to be one operation. Now n times the sum of y squared, and let's going to subtract that. I'm going to take the sum of y, and when we find the sum of y, we're going to square it, and we're going to close the bracket, and we want to take the square root of it. Now, here is an important point to realize that a couple of things. First of all, the best way to do this problem is to do the math, and so best way to do, after you substitute, multiply the 2 out and multiply the 2 also, and here's also the subtraction rather, and write it out. Another thing you'll notice is that there's a bracket here, okay, and then there's a bracket right beside that. So it's best after you place the numbers in here, when you substitute, you know, multiply, square, and the subtract rather. Very important to do the stepwise, and also don't forget to take the square root in the end that sometimes we forget. So now let's substitute the values. N is 7, that's how many data points we have. The sum of xy, it's right here, it's 93, right? And then we're going to have a subtraction, the sum of x times the sum of y, and those you can find right here's the sum of x, and here's the sum of y, making sure also that we don't forget the subtraction sign. And right, we keep the parenthesis, right? Very important, so we can remember that we need to multiply. All right, we're going to divide that and we're going to keep substituting, and the denominator we have n, right? We have the bracket n, which is 7. The sum of x squared is 68, and take away the sum of x. We look in the column which is 20, and then we square that, and then we close the bracket, then the new bracket and a 7. The sum of y squared is 136, and subtract that, and we find the sum of y, and then we square it and we close the bracket. Now the next step is going to be the start multiplying and simplifying this a little bit. So 7 times 93 is going to give you 651, and don't forget the subtraction. 20 times 30 is going to be 600, divided by 7 times 68 will give you 476. Subtract 20 square is going to be 400, and then make sure you put the brackets. Then the next bracket, 7 times 136 will give you 952, and subtract that from 30 square, which is 900. Close the bracket, and don't forget the square root. So the next step will be 651, and take away 600, and that's going to give you 51, divided by 476. Take away 400, and that's going to give you 76. Once again, don't forget the bracket, and 952 take away 900, that's going to give you 52. Now close the bracket, and don't forget the square root. 51 divided by 76 times 52 is going to give you 3,952, and don't forget again the square root. Then again, 51 divided by the square root of 3,952, and that's going to be 62.8649. And then we do the division and give you 0.811, which is a very strong correlation and a strong relationship between x and y. So therefore, there is an increase in amount of fertilizer used that would lead to increase in the food supply. And that would be all for my part. Thank you very much for listening and for your participation in this class.